Willem Zwart is a teacher at the Oak Grove School in Ojai, California. Its approach to education is based on the teachings of J. Krishnamurti. Born in 1896 in a small village in India, Krishnamurti spent most of his adult life traveling the globe and speaking on the need for humanity to undergo a radical change in consciousness. He died in 1986. His talks attracted people from all walks of life, from spiritual seekers to educators to scientists. The core of his teaching was simple and direct. Truth is a pathless land.
Krishnamurti encouraged people to be a light to oneself. And in that sense, too, you find some similarity with what Nietzsche was saying. Krishnamurti said, deny all authority, all outward authority, the authority of priests, of the state, of religions, of guru, of the family, but also the authority ultimately of the self, of you yourself, of your own thoughts. But this is not about a sense of personal enlightenment. It has nothing to do with that. He is centrally interested in how do you change the world at large. And he says to deeply do that in a lasting and a sustainable way, we need to start with ourselves. For Krishnamurti, the only true moral action is to become aware of our conditioning. Because any other action, he would say, comes from that conditioning, and it is this conditioning that has brought about a world of violence and suffering. I would say that the biggest challenges I face in my classroom in order to get students to examine morality is it is very hard to shake students loose from their moral convictions. Indeed, students are in no way exceptional in that sense, but it is very rare for a student to change his or her moral position on an issue in the course of examining that issue. So it's very hard to get to that place of not knowing because it makes us feel insecure.
Which is why, according to Krishnamurti, we cling so tenaciously to our beliefs, ideas, dogmas, and ideologies, all which condition the way we see the world. Willem Zwart sees his task as helping awaken in his students an attitude that is characterized by a deep questioning of their own conditioning.
So in many ways, when we examine these divisive moral issues that we see in American culture, but all over the world ultimately, we really discover that people approach these topics from their own conditioning, and that in many ways that conditioning itself is what leads to conflicts. So what we then try to do in the classroom as we examine these issues and as we deal with our own relationships between students and teachers, we really try to question what is it that we bring with that. And that no matter what the situation you're in, one action you can always commit is the action of watching yourself, watching your own responses, watching the thoughts that arise, watching the feelings that arise, the impulses.
Krishnamurti claimed that in the process of becoming aware of the contents of our consciousness, we discover that in a very fundamental sense, we are not different from each other. He expressed this insight with the phrase, "We are the world."
We have the same insecurities, we share the same suffering, the same fears and hopes. So in that sense, we cannot just point a finger at those who disagree with us and say, they are the evil guys. In a sense, in that person, in the person who we thought was evil, we have to recognize that their consciousness is very similar to our consciousness, that they may have fallen into something that we fall into as well. So there's a sense of compassion, a sense of caring even for that person we disagree with. But also in the sense that society is the outward manifestation of our inward consciousness. So in other words, society has come from who we are as human beings. Therefore, to change the world means to change ourselves.
Krishnamurti's focus on the self and its conditioning is rooted in an issue that is central to his teachings. What kind of mind is capable of responding adequately to the disturbing state of the world, and what are the obstacles to having such a mind? This is not unlike a scientist who, before studying a phenomenon, looks to the quality of the apparatus that will be used to observe it. After all, if I want to peer deeply into the starry heavens, I will need to make sure my telescope is capable of seeing a greater distance than 5 meters. Also, I will constantly be cleaning the lens of my telescope to make sure it is free of dust and smudges. Krishnamurti claimed that likewise we must clear our minds of any conditioning that distorts our ability to see with clarity. His emphasis on the importance of clearing the mind is not unique. Eastern religions, like Buddhism, also stress the importance of a still mind, free of impediments that cloud perception. However, Krishnamurti is unique in insisting that there is no method, formula, practice, or technique that one can use to free the mind of its conditioning. According to Krishnamurti, this freeing of the mind only happens through what he called choiceless awareness.
Choiceless awareness is a very experiential thing. In other words, we experience our feelings, our thoughts, we question them. It's a very active thing, as if one would watch a child on one's lap, with love and compassion, suspending judgment with patience. Only when we examine ourselves in this way can the entirety of who we are come to the surface, and thus, through insight into the content of our own consciousness, empty itself. And all of this in the midst of living, in the midst of daily life. So in a sense then, that experience becomes the basis of morality, rather than a set of rules, a code of moral behavior, or a set of beliefs that we have. It becomes a sensitivity that we develop in ourselves. And I think that's a radically different way of looking at morality and the source of morality.
In a sense, we're talking about a living morality, I guess. It's a creative morality, in a sense, as opposed to what would you do in this situation? Well, we don't really know what we'd do in any situation. We can theorize, but what's important is what we're doing in this situation.
Absolutely. I think an awareness of what is going on right now in ourselves, in a situation, in others, brings often with it a certain action, and that action will often be very appropriate to the situation rather than to our preconceived sense of our ideological stance in life, our moral codes, perhaps what our parents have taught us or our society has told us to do. That action is a very different action. That action in and of itself has a quality of deep abiding love. And that love, which is expressed as sensitivity, as compassion, that love will act in the world through us, and with that comes a great sense of responsibility.
For Krishnamurti, this love that acts in the world and through us is an expression of an intelligence that is awakened when the mind is free of conditioning. Krishnamurti is not alone in suggesting that there is an intelligence that flowers when, quote, the mind discovers its fallibility, when it discovers what it is capable of and what it is not. Neurologist Dr. Robert Burton recently had a conversation with a colleague that echoes Krishnamurti's understanding of intelligence.
I had dinner last night with a scientist who's actually one of the leaders in the country in emergence theory and complexity theory. And he just received a several $1 million grant to study what intelligence is. And in the artificial intelligence community, it's been thought that the brain is computation. The brain works by figuring things out in a computational basis like a computer. And his idea is that computations that the brain does is just one aspect of what overall intelligence is. And that as we grow in our understanding, we may find that our notions about how the brain works are very simple-minded presently. And there may, in fact, be a larger picture. Is there something beyond the individual that we'll find out is operational in each individual but is not confined to the individual?
The discovery of something that is operational in each of us, but not confined to any one of us, sounds, well, like something that mystics from different religious traditions have spoken of through the ages. Father Michael Mulhall.
Mysticism is the experience that I belong to something much bigger than, number one, myself, number two, my family, my society, my language group, my race, my belief network, all of those things. I belong to something bigger than that. That's where morality and mysticism come very close to one another. When we begin to understand that I have to join in a wider dance, I participate in the creation of a new world.
I think most neuroscientists would accept that the self is an emergent phenomena that arises out of multiple aspects of brain function that occur in the unconscious. And that includes personal memory, autobiographical stories we tell about ourselves, many of which are fictions. On the one hand, that can lead to a sort of postmodernist relativism that nothing really counts. But at the same time, it can lead to a more, I don't know if the Buddhist is the right word, can lead to a sense that the self is really an illusion. To the extent that you lose your personal sense of belief in your individuality, you might be better able to dispense with the us versus them paradigm. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm hopeful that that's true.
In my mind's eye, I see myself walking down a road. I come upon a large sign. It reads, "The hour is upon us. Repent now." Then something mysterious happens. The H in hour disappears, leaving only the letters O-U-R. The sign now reads, "The hour is upon us. Rejoice now." When reflecting on the state of the world, I'm reminded of something a friend said to me. He's a visual artist, and one day I was visiting him in his studio. He was working on a new painting, and I asked him how it was going. He replied, "Well, sometimes it looks like a piece of crap, and other times it looks brilliant. It all depends on how I squint at it. I'm not sure where the world is headed. I squint one way, and I think that maybe things aren't as dire as they seem. Other times I can't help thinking that we're headed towards a future of unparalleled catastrophe. And if we are, we just might see the issue of moral certainty in an entirely different light." Professor Susan Dimmick.
If the world suddenly was very different than it currently is, what we believe to be morally good or right now might be radically different. Our morality is based upon the possibility of mutual cooperation and mutual benefit. If the world was such that we were in a life and death struggle with every other human being, a lot of the things that we think are moral truths right now would not be true there, because we would be in a kind of lifeboat situation. Other people would stand in the relationship with us not as potential partners, cooperative partners, but rather as direct threats. Well, that would be a radically different world than we currently live in, and what would be morally required of us presumably would be radically different.
On Ideas and the Moral of the Story Is by CBC producer Frank Falk. Ideas associate producer Liz Naj. Technical production Dave Field.